Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Krista Burris.
And I am Dr. Michael Kim.
And we're here with Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care.
And today is June 23rd.
Yes. 2021.
And this is our COVID show where we go through things that impact the Coachella Valley as it pertains to the COVID-19 and the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. We're having a little bit of rain here in the valley, which cooled things off, but our humidity's higher. And just FYI, a lot of us allergy sufferers are noticing the change in barometric pressure. And if that's you, you want to make sure that you're paying attention, maybe taking your allergy medicine or getting some steam. But it's part of living in the valley, but I guess this is what passes for monsoon season here.
Yeah, we just got an update alert that La Quinta is getting
thunder.
Well, it looks like it's raining now.
Oh, wow.
So if you're in La Quinta...
And watch out for flash floods as well. As we know, when it rains in the mountains, it floods in the valleys. And so even if you don't get rain, be aware that could happen later today.
Yeah. If it rains for another 3 minutes, it's going to flood.
Oh, yeah. So I thought we'd start with our numbers. As last week, we talked about how our COVID numbers had come down and stayed nice and flat. And indeed, the county has really continued to see a flattening in the numbers. Oh, thunder here. So what we saw here in the Coachella Valley last week were 82 new reported cases and no deaths. And our positivity rate for the county this past week was 1.1. So that continues to drop. We are technically in the yellow tier, even though we're no longer going by the tier system. But I remember back when we were in purple, and I just thought we'd never see this day. It just seemed like such a dream that we would actually have such low numbers. So we are there. Our transmission rate's low. And it does look like if we go down on this slide, that we're having still, what I would call low-level transmission in the community. You'll see that we still have some hospitalizations, and that our local positivity rate is 1.5%, which is a little bit higher than the county, but not too much higher. So I'm pretty happy with that. Think we're doing okay, but it is a good reminder that the virus is still out there. And so if you haven't been able to get vaccinated, you are still vulnerable, and you need to keep that in mind, especially as those around you may have stopped taking as many precautions.
Yeah. I would rather have that hospitalization number be even a little less, because even though it's tiny, you've talked about this over and over. It doesn't take much to double that or to increase that. And so,
but I do think realistically, unless we were to hit vaccination rates that are more in the 70 to 80% of the population completely vaccinated, we're stuck with this low-level transmission probably forever. And that's sort of the reality of this virus. We could stamp it out if we could get our vaccination rates.
I don't know, forever.
Well, I would say in the state where it wasn't an ongoing thing in the hospitals, where we weren't seeing, basically every day people testing positive and being hospitalized, because we're still at that level. It's just not a whole bunch of people. Right. But at this point, almost every single death from COVID in the United States was preventable. And so currently the US is losing about 300 people a day. And so we kind of look at that number and say, well, those were preventable deaths. if the vaccination rate in the whole population was high enough, that person would have never run into coronavirus and been exposed to it. So that's kind of where we are now. And, time will tell whether we're able to actually get our vaccination rates higher. I think that we have a chance to get to the point where there's not ongoing transmission in the community and it becomes more of a sporadic disease. Like you said, not that it's forever gone, but maybe it's not something that's being transmitted continuously in the community, but maybe is introduced every now and then and a few cases pop up, but then it dies out. So almost more like measles is, where most of the time you don't have measles passing through a community, but every now and then there's a little outbreak. So I suspect that's where we're going with COVID. And, there's always going to be a component of your population that's not immune, either because they're not vaccinated or because their immune system is compromised. So we're always going to have vulnerable members of our population who are able to get sick if they meet this virus.
So you don't think it'll ever turn into like the flu, where it's rather seasonal, or even when it comes through, there'll be a point in time where most people have some immunity to it, and then based on whether you have diseases or you're old or you're so so like with the flu, not everyone who gets in contact with it is going to have a problem, but some will, and we still have deaths from the flu every year. So
I honestly don't know, but it's looking a little less flu-like to me, because the vaccine is so good at preventing disease. I mean, our flu vaccine is really only about 50% effective at preventing disease. And this one is 95% effective. So we have a much better chance of actually getting this down to zero in the community with high enough vaccination rates than we would ever have with the flu. And the other thing is that the flu, I've had the flu several times over the course of my career, and I've been vaccinated every year, and I feel like I've got pretty good natural immunity plus the vaccine immunity, but I still think it's quite possible for me to catch a bad flu. I mean, the flu just mutates so much, and it's there's so many different strains of it. With coronavirus, it's looking like, it sure is mutating, but it doesn't seem to be mutating as quickly as the flu virus does and as virulently. So hopefully we won't see more of these things develop, but we see with new flu strains, it's almost like you've never seen it before. And we've really had some nasty flus come out that even if you had previous influenza, you were completely vulnerable to. So we don't want to see that with COVID. That's one reason we're trying to get it really stamped out.
No, I agree. I think this is more like a really nasty cold, more-ish, but because it's so new, it barrels through everyone. But I don't think it's as virulent as a really bad flu.
Oh, no, I think severe COVID is.
Well, it is, but the virus itself, because it doesn't mutate as quickly. I'm not saying that the COVID, once you get it, it's because we have no immunity to it. I mean, I would suppose if we went back hundreds of years in the first cold virus, it would probably took out a lot of people.
Colds used to kill a lot of people. And in our modern age, we kind of discount the dangerousness of a common cold. But even a basic common cold can kill vulnerable people. Right. Yeah, and in the old days, I think when they were first introduced, they were really quite serious.
Well, do you want to talk about the Delta variant, since that seems to be the predominant or becoming?
The Delta variant, we talked about it last week a bit, about how it was doubling in the United States every 1 to 2 weeks, and that has continued. And I think last week it was up to about 10% of the variants were being identified in the United States as Delta variants. And now, as of today, that number is at 20%. So it looks like very quickly, as in maybe a week and a half, it will be the most common variant being identified in the United States. This is concerning because this one does look to be more dangerous and more transmissible. So that means, those things that we've come to accept as second nature, like putting a mask on and being 6 feet away to protect us, might actually not even be enough for the Delta variant. The Delta variant might be able to get through those types of distancing and infect susceptible people. The really good news we have is that the vaccine is very effective against the Delta variant if you've had both doses.
Or the two-dose vaccine.
The two-dose vaccine.
Yeah.
The Johnson & Johnson is also effective. But it's not great if you've only had one dose. I think it's around 50% effective. So there's some protection, but it's not great. So there's this group of people out there who've only had one of their shots for whatever reason. This is a great time to go back and get that second shot if you're due for it, because we get much, much better protection after that second shot. You get close to 90% protection. That's great. The other thing that they're seeing with the Delta variant is younger people are ending up in the hospitals. So these are people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, not just 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And in fact, that is who is showing up in the hospitals, primarily because a lot of the older people are currently vaccinated. So I don't think we're going back to a big surge like we had last winter, because we've done a good job at vaccinating our most vulnerable people. But now we need to vaccinate the people who think that they're not vulnerable, which is our 20s and 30s and some of our 40-year-olds who just kind of haven't gotten around to it because they don't feel like COVID is a personal threat. The Delta variant is a bigger personal threat than the original variant for younger people.
Or for people who haven't gotten the vaccine.
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Because if you're still in the high-risk category, then this is even a worse.
Yeah. So I think as a country, we'll be okay. But if you yourself are not protected, this is a moment where you might reassess that decision and maybe prioritize getting vaccinated in your schedule. Because remember, right now, it's taking at least that first dose and third dose, and then 2 weeks after that, at least 5 weeks to be considered protected. And in 5 weeks, the Delta variant will have taken over in the United States. So this is kind of your last chance to start the process to be protected by the time the Delta variant's everywhere. Yeah.
So did you want to talk about anything else, or I think you?
I think time-wise, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are we do another show afterward called Your Personal Health, and we talk about a little bit more just about primary care in general. And so if you want to stick around for that show, we'd love to have you. If you have any questions about the COVID and what's going on with our clinic, the Coachella Valley, you can always leave a comment and we will try to answer those. All right, everyone, we'll see you later.